You won't believe what happened behind the scenes of Tasha Cobbs Leonard's marriage. For years, Tasha and Kenneth Leonard were seen as the perfect couple in the gospel world. Their pictures together at church events, smiling in matching outfits, always seemed to radiate love, faith, and unity. Their fans adored them, believing that their marriage was not just blessed by God, but a shining example of what true love looked like. These were the type of couples that everyone aspired to be like. Tasha, the powerful gospel singer, and Kenneth, her devoted husband. Together, they led worship sessions, appeared in interviews, and shared their personal moments with their fans. They seemed like the ultimate power couple, serving both the church and each other with purpose. The images they painted were perfect. On stage, they always looked in sync, like two halves of the same whole. Their social media feeds were filled with loving captions, powerful prayers, and praise for each other. They seemed to have it all: faith, love, and success. People admired their unity, and fans loved watching them support each other in everything they did. It was clear that Tasha and Kenneth were a match made in heaven, and no one doubted it. They were the couple everyone talked about, whispered about, even, in awe of how perfect they seemed. But sometimes the image we see in the public eye doesn't reflect what's really going on behind closed doors. That's where things start to get a little less clear. While fans saw them as this rock-solid couple, some noticed subtle changes in Tasha. It wasn't obvious at first, just small things that didn't quite add up. At interviews, for instance, Tasha would sometimes seem distracted when Kenneth spoke on her behalf. There were times when she didn't seem as engaged as she once did. She used to be the one to share stories about their life together, but now she let him do most of the talking. At first, people brushed it off. Maybe she was just tired or had a lot on her plate. After all, they were both busy with ministry work, right? But then there were other signs. Tasha began attending events alone. These were the same events she used to attend with Kenneth by her side. It wasn't just once or twice, it became a pattern. People started to wonder why he wasn't there anymore. And then came the pictures, or the lack of them. Tasha, who had always shared sweet moments with her husband, began posting fewer pictures of the two of them together. Fans started to notice. Her captions no longer spoke about their love or partnership, but instead, they focused on her own inner peace and self-discovery. It was as if something was shifting, but no one dared to ask the question, what was happening behind the scenes? Fans tried to brush it off. Couples go through phases, they told themselves. It was easy to dismiss the changes. After all, social media isn't real life. But for those who were paying attention, the shift in Tasha's posts, the change in her energy, was undeniable. She wasn't the same vibrant, joyful person she used to be when she shared everything with Kenneth. There was something different about her, something that seemed to say that not everything was perfect, even if they still smiled for the cameras. But who could have guessed the truth that was hiding just out of sight? The questions continued to grow quietly. Why did Tasha seem so distant in her interviews? Why did she appear to be avoiding relationship topics, especially when she was so open about her marriage before? Why was Kenneth suddenly nowhere to be found in her social media posts or ministry events? It felt like the couple fans had admired for so long was slipping further and further into the background, but no one wanted to say it out loud. Maybe they just needed some time apart. Maybe it was just business, the pressures of ministry. But deep down, there was something more. It wasn't like there were public fights or scandals. Tasha didn't speak badly of Kenneth, and they didn't have explosive arguments that hit the headlines. No one knew exactly what was happening behind closed doors, but to the few who were paying close attention, it was obvious that something was off. It wasn't just distance, it felt like disconnection. People started to wonder what was really going on with Tasha and Kenneth. Could the perfect marriage they had always shown the world really be as perfect as it seemed? The truth was something had changed, And what no one expected, but somehow everyone had been bracing for, was about to come out. But the real twist, it would come in the most unexpected way, a quiet, vulnerable moment that would reveal everything. That's when things took a turn that no one could have seen coming. It all started with a simple Instagram live, a moment that would change everything. Tasha Cobbs Leonard went live on a quiet Sunday evening, and what was meant to be a calming prayer session quickly became something entirely different. There were no filters, no professional lighting, no polished background, just Tasha, dressed casually in a hoodie, sitting in a softly lit room. It felt intimate, raw, and incredibly real, a far cry from the perfectly curated images she had once shared with the world. As she began speaking, her voice cracked, revealing a side of her that no one had seen before. At first, she shared a message of faith, as she always did. But soon, it became clear that something was weighing heavily on her heart. She talked about feeling like she was drowning while trying to smile for the world. She spoke of carrying the burdens of someone else's story while hiding her own. And then, in a moment of vulnerability, she paused. Her eyes filled with emotion, and she said something that would send shockwaves through her followers. "I stayed silent for too long, and it has cost me more than most people will ever know." In that moment, everything changed. The fans who had been sensing that something was wrong suddenly realized they had been right all along. The woman they had admired for so long, the gospel queen they believed had the perfect life, was revealing a painful truth that no one had expected. She didn't say his name, but it was clear who she was talking about. There had been deep pain behind the scenes, pain that wasn't caused by critics or strangers, but by the very person who was supposed to be her partner, her support system, and her best friend. The truth had finally come to light, but the craziest part, that was just the beginning. Tasha's confession set off a flood of emotions among her followers. They had always seen her as strong, as a beacon of faith and love, and now they were seeing a side of her that was broken, struggling, and desperately searching for her voice. But the reality of her situation was far more complicated than anyone could have imagined. The more Tasha opened up about her pain, the more people realized just how much she had been holding back for years. For so long, she had stayed silent, trying to protect her marriage, her ministry, and her image. But now, in a vulnerable moment, she was speaking out, and everything she had kept hidden came pouring out. It wasn't just about her struggles with her marriage. It was about years of emotional manipulation, silencing her voice, and being forced to surrender parts of her identity that had once been so important to her. And here's where it gets even more shocking. Tasha revealed that she had been emotionally manipulated by Kenneth, the man everyone had once seen as her protector. She didn't say it in anger or bitterness, but in sadness and sorrow. She explained how, for years, Kenneth had used his spiritual authority to silence her opinions, dismiss her mental health struggles, and control decisions in both their personal life and ministry. It was as if she had been living in a prison built by the very person who was supposed to love her the most. The words she used were heart-wrenching. She said that for years, she had been told that submission meant surrendering her identity. She had been taught that her calling, her dreams, and her voice were secondary to Kenneth's vision. And in the process, she had lost herself. "I wasn't being loved, I was being managed," she confessed. Those words hit like a ton of bricks, especially for fans who had always looked up to Kenneth as a devoted and caring husband. But here's where it gets even more complicated. Tasha wasn't speaking out to tear anyone down. She made it clear that her goal wasn't to destroy Kenneth's reputation or to shame him in any way. Instead, she said she wanted to be transparent, not just for her own healing, but to help others who might be suffering in silence too. She knew that her story was not just hers to tell. It was a story that could resonate with countless others who had been hiding their own pain for far too long. Her honesty, though painful, was the first step toward healing. not just for her, but for many others who had been trapped in similar situations. And the world took notice. Tasha's Instagram live session quickly went viral, and the reactions flooded in. People who had followed her for years expressed shock, disbelief, and deep sadness. They couldn't believe the woman they had looked up to, the woman who had always seemed so confident and poised, was dealing with such profound pain. But at the same time, her followers were filled with admiration for her bravery. She had finally found her voice, and it was a voice that was stronger than ever before. Just days after Tasha's heart-wrenching Instagram Live, she took another bold step, one that would send waves throughout her entire community. She posted a written statement to her followers, something she had never done before. It wasn't just a casual update or a thank you for the love and support she had received. No, this message was different. It was time for her to be transparent in a way she had never been before, and she wasn't holding anything back. In her post, Tasha shared that the emotional manipulation she had spoken about in the live session wasn't just a small issue, it had been a constant part of her life for years. She explained how Kenneth, while never physically abusive, had controlled her in ways that most people would never even think about. It wasn't just about making decisions for their ministry or their personal life. It was about controlling her identity, her voice, and even her worth. Tasha described how Kenneth used his position of spiritual authority to make her feel small, to make her believe that she had to always submit, to always put his needs first, even if it meant sacrificing her own. She had been led to believe that being a good wife meant giving up parts of herself, her dreams, her thoughts, her desires. She was told that to disagree with him was to dishonor him. And over time, that's exactly what happened. She began to lose herself, slowly but surely, until she was no longer the woman she used to be. And then, in the most painful part of her message, she wrote the words that would stay with everyone who read it. It took me years to realize that I wasn't being loved. I was being managed. It was like a gut punch, a shocking admission that turned everything fans thought they knew about the couple upside down. For years, Tasha had been praised for her strong faith, her devotion, and her marriage, but now she was revealing the truth. Her love story was far from perfect. The impact of her words was immediate. Fans flooded the comment sections, sharing their support for Tasha, offering prayers, and opening up about their own experiences with emotional abuse. It was clear that Tasha's courage had given many others the strength to speak out as well. But there were also those who couldn't believe what they were reading. Some refused to believe that Kenneth, the man they had admired for so long, could be capable of causing such pain. They wanted to protect the image of the perfect couple they had built in their minds. But Tasha wasn't just tearing down an image. She was tearing down years of silence and fear. Kenneth, on the other hand, remained silent for days. His absence only fueled the fire, with fans growing more and more anxious to hear his side of the story. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he broke his silence with a short and vague post on social media. He didn't directly address any of the allegations made by Tasha, nor did he apologize. Instead, his statement was impersonal, almost robotic. We all have things to work on. I pray for healing in every broken place. That was it. It was as if he was acknowledging the situation, but not taking full responsibility for the pain that had been caused. It left many wondering if he truly understood the depth of the harm he had done. Some fans tried to defend Kenneth, saying that his statement was a sign of maturity, an effort to avoid airing their dirty laundry in public. But for others, it felt like a cop-out. They saw his vague response as an attempt to dodge accountability to avoid facing the truth of what had been going on behind closed doors. The division between Tasha's supporters and Kenneth's defenders grew wider by the day. For Tasha, though, there was no turning back. She had exposed the truth, and there was no way to erase it. The carefully constructed image of their perfect marriage had been shattered, and now the world was left to pick up the pieces. But even in the face of so much public pain and division, Tasha remained firm in her decision to speak out. She wasn't doing this for attention or to tear anyone down. She was doing it for herself, for her healing, and for the many others who were silently suffering in relationships that looked perfect on the outside but were toxic on the inside. What made this story different from any other celebrity scandal was that it wasn't just about betrayal or infidelity. It was about the silent, often invisible forms of abuse that happen behind closed doors, especially in religious communities. Tasha's decision to share her truth opened the door for a larger conversation about emotional manipulation, control, and the impact of unchecked authority in relationships. And as much as it hurt to speak out, Tasha knew it was the only way for her to move forward. Tasha's journey didn't end with the revelation. In fact, it was only just beginning. The public response to her confession was intense, but she wasn't about to let it define her. What followed in the weeks after her brave announcement was a transformation that would be seen by millions of people. And this time, it wasn't about being a gospel star or a wife. This time it was about Tasha Cobbs Leonard reclaiming her life, her voice, and her sense of self. As the spotlight shifted, Tasha started to share more about her personal healing process. She opened up in ways she had never done before. Therapy became a cornerstone of her recovery, a place where she could finally process all the emotions she had kept buried for so long. She surrounded herself with supportive people, those who respected her voice and helped her rediscover the parts of herself she had lost in the years of manipulation. But the most powerful change came from within. She realized that she had been living in fear for far too long, fear of being judged, of not being believed, of disappointing the very people who had once adored her. But now that fear was gone. She was no longer hiding. She was standing tall, speaking out, and for the first time in years, living for herself. Tasha's courage led her to create something truly special, a private women's retreat called Silent No More. This retreat wasn't just for fun or relaxation. It was a sanctuary for women who had been through similar struggles, women who had felt silenced, ignored, or manipulated. It was a place where they could find healing, rediscover their worth, and learn to speak their truth, just as Tasha had done. She wasn't just leading people in worship anymore. She was leading them in healing. The retreat became a safe space for women to let go of their shame and start a new chapter in their own lives. Tasha's music, too, began to reflect this new season. The lyrics of her songs, once about triumph and victory, now carried deeper emotion and vulnerability. Her performances were no longer just about entertaining the audience. They were about ministering from the heart. Each song, each note, carried the weight of her personal journey. People could feel the pain and the healing in her voice, and it resonated with them on a much deeper level. She wasn't performing to be admired anymore. She was ministering to others from the wounds that had once defined her. And in doing so, she began to help heal the brokenness of others. Her music wasn't just a reflection of her faith. It was a testament to her strength and resilience. Meanwhile, Kenneth's response, or lack of one, continued to leave many questions unanswered. His vague apology, where he admitted that he had failed as a husband, but stopped short of taking full accountability, left a sour taste in the mouths of many. Some saw it as an attempt at peace, while others viewed it as a refusal to face the truth. His silence, in many ways, spoke louder than any words he could have said. He didn't seem ready to face the pain he had caused, and as a result, his reputation began to suffer. He became more withdrawn, his online following dwindled, and invitations to speak at events were fewer and farther between. The man who once stood proudly beside Tasha now found himself standing alone, facing the fallout from his actions. But despite everything Kenneth went through, Tasha remained focused on her own healing journey. She wasn't looking back at what she had lost. Instead, She was looking forward to what she was building for herself and for others. Her courage to speak out had sparked a movement, a conversation that was long overdue. Her story became a beacon of hope for countless others who had suffered in silence, especially within the church. It forced the gospel community to confront the realities of emotional abuse, control, and manipulation in relationships that were often hidden behind a veil of faith. And in doing so, Tasha had created a new narrative, one where speaking the truth was an act of righteousness, not rebellion. Today, Tasha Cobbs Leonard is walking into a new season of her life, one defined not by the scandal or the heartbreak, but by her strength, her clarity, and her authenticity. She is no longer just the gospel singer everyone admired from afar. She is a woman who has learned to love herself, to reclaim her voice, and to rise from the ashes of her past. She continues to minister to her fans, not from a platform of perfection, but from the deep well of truth and redemption that she has discovered through her healing process.